Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
Do your patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not multifocal.
Exactly, not multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode. With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Hello and welcome to the Open Your Eyes podcast. I'm Dr. Kerry Gelb, the host of the documentary Open Your Eyes. If you're new here and you like our interviews, press like, subscribe, share, and hit the bell to get notifications of great new interviews. Also, please leave comments. Great news, you can now watch our full-length documentary, Open Your Eyes, on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube movies and shows. Clinical research, including clinical trials, play a key role in enhancing patient care and advancing medical knowledge. It addresses key questions on disease prevention, diagnosis, and treatment, thereby fostering scientific breakthroughs that directly benefits patients. Today's guest is Natasha Hindman, Dr. Natasha Hindman, an optometrist from Pennsylvania who serves as the Director of Clinical Research at Scott and Christie Eyecare Associates. Her research focuses on dry eye, glaucoma, blepharitis, presbyopia, myopia, and allergies. Dr. Hindman, thank you for joining me today on Open Your Eyes podcast with Dr. Kerry Gelb.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, somebody who does clinical trials, I'm always in awe of them because you're the ones that do the research to allow me to be a better doctor. You know, one of the problems is sometimes it takes 17 years for that research to actually hit clinical practice, which is a problem. What do you think? How can we shorten that time from 17 years to maybe 1 or 2 years?
It's a great question. I wish I had an answer for that one. You know what? It does take forever. I usually tell people it's anywhere from 5 to 10 years from the phase 1 to FDA approval. There's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape in the government, so these things tend to take a long time. Once you've got something approved, then the company takes a long time to get their marketing under wraps, and so even after it gets FDA approval, it takes a while to even get to market.
And why do you think as a researcher, clinical trials are so important?
Without them, we don't have anything we use now. I mean, the FDA governs what we can and cannot prescribe and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so without clinical trials, we don't have any of the new advances that we've had in optometry. Just in the last couple of years, we've got a lot of new medications that have come to market. You know, big ones that work and have taken over the market share, and maybe some that aren't as popular, but without the options, we're pigeonholed into using 1 or 2 things.
And how often have you done clinical trials where you saw that what you were studying, whether maybe a contact lens or a medication, it didn't work and you had to end the clinical trial?
It doesn't usually end before we have finished our role. The pharmaceutical company will often say, you know, we didn't prove our endpoint, so we're going to scrap it, or we're going to try this a different way. It does happen. There's several just in this last year that did not make it past the phase they were working on.
And how many would you say your site has conducted?
So I've been doing this for about 7.5 years, and just myself have been involved in over 100 clinical trials for different disease indications and states. So you named the big one. Dry eye is the bread and butter because there's nothing great out there for dry eye right now. Blepharitis, MGD, presbyopia, myopia control for kids. So well over 100, several thousand patients have been involved. It's my full-time job. I don't actually see patients in regular patient care anymore. It is strictly clinical research.
Oh, strictly clinical research. Wow. So what kind of organization do you need to do clinical trials? I tried doing some clinical trials, and I'm not sure I'm organized as a person to be able to do that.
It is one of the things you definitely need is a lot of organizational skills. When I first started doing this at this practice, Dr. Christie is an ophthalmologist here in the Pittsburgh area who'd already started doing clinical trials. When I came here, I came just to be an optometrist in the practice. They saw that I had some research experience when I was in undergrad, and I guess thought that maybe that meant it would translate to clinical research. I had never known it was a possibility for an optometrist to do this. I love it. And so when I got here, they had maybe 2 or 3 running at that time. And so I would do a day or two a week with the research and the rest of the time in standard practice. And since I got here, we've grown so much that we do anywhere between 20 to 30 clinical trials at any given time. Some of them are, just starting, some are actively enrolling, some are getting ready to close. But it's busy enough that we've got myself, plus there's 5 of our other full-time staff members that work strictly on clinical research. So to start, you just got to get your foot in the door. That's probably the hardest part, is to become known by the pharmaceutical industry as a location that is capable of doing clinical research.
And in preparation, what makes a good clinical trial versus one that's not so good?
Well, there's a lot of things. The thing that makes it the easiest is if the drug works.
Huh.
Whatever is being tested, if it works, it is easy to sell it to not sell it, but to convince patients that it's a good option for them as opposed to one that maybe doesn't work so well. From my perspective, as far as running the clinical trial, having a protocol that makes sense. So we're given a protocol that's written and designed by the pharmaceutical company that outlines every single thing that you're meant to do within the trial. So who can be enrolled, who should not be enrolled, what steps you take, what the medication's supposed to do, how often they take it. When it's written well and it's easy to follow, it's a good trial. When there are immediate questions when you read it because you're not certain how it's meant to be conducted, that's not such a good trial, and it spells errors down the road. And the FDA governs all this. So if a trial is conducted and then the FDA is told that the drug company is ready to submit, the FDA can come and inspect your location to make sure that you conducted the trial appropriately. And if the protocol is not written well, that falls on you. So a well-written, clear, concise protocol with a drug or device that works is a dream.
And how do you find patients for the clinical trials? And how many patients typically are in a clinical trial?
So it depends on the phase. So there's 4 phases of clinical trials. The first 3 are prior to FDA authorization, and then phase 4 are after they've been approved, that it's post-market. So they want to add an indication to their label. They want more information for marketing. And so phase 1 trials have a small number of people across the country, not just at one location, to make sure that it's safe. A phase 2 trial has a slightly larger number. So in ophthalmology, a phase 1 might have 5 to 10 people in the whole thing. A phase 2 might have 50 to 300 people. And then a phase 3 is a much larger scale to make sure that it is efficacious, that it works appropriately. And then you're talking several hundred to 1,000 people across the country. At our site, usually we'll put 20 to 30 people in any particular trial. And that's the way they want it, because they don't want you to have all of the patients from one location. The demographics won't be right. So they want them from all over the country to make sure that they're getting a good sample of the population.
And I see behind you there's different medications. I guess those are medications that you perform clinical trials on.
Yep, these are all medications that we've worked on that have come to market. There's more you can't see, but this is kind of our room of fame. Some of these people may have heard of, and some of them are ones that have kind of lost favor in the industry for whatever reason, better options, or just not as efficacious as some others.
And how difficult is it to get patients to show up for their appointment?
I think I've heard for other locations that they have some trouble with this. We don't. Dr. Christie's been doing this in this office for 20 some years. So patients are aware of this location as being a site for clinical trials. So we don't typically have that problem. The patients come from our medical practice. So, one of the optometrists or ophthalmologists will say, you have dry eye. We do clinical trials. Would you be interested in that? And then my department gets their information and we go over the option with them. And if they decide they want to do it, they come in. And one of the things I love the most about clinical trials is that a visit can take 1 to 2 hours. That's a long time, but it lets you really get to know these people. And so they become not friends necessarily, but you get to know them very well, and they come and they bring us Christmas presents, and we get to know them on a different level, which is what I love about it. But then they come back. So if a patient came and did one dry eye study, they're very likely going to come and do another one in 6 months to a year because they enjoyed it.
And when you give them different medications, do they have to pay for the medication?
No, so within a clinical trial, they don't pay anything. In fact, they are paid for their time and energy for being in the trial. So it's part of the allure for some. The majority of our patients will say, I don't do it for the money. Like they like the idea of it being part of advancement of science. I'm sure the money helps, but the people who typically are doing it for money, they're the ones that don't keep coming back. The ones who do it because of the altruism of it, they come back because they feel like they're helping.
Well, that's great. A lot of people like to help
Yes.
each other and help humanity. And this is a great way of doing it. And now you've been working on something called presbyopia clinical trials. Explain what presbyopia is.
So presbyopia is the very unfortunate thing that happens to us all, usually early to mid 40s, when the parts of the eye that allow you to focus up close no longer function the same way. And this is when people start wearing bifocals, reading glasses, etc., to help them to see up close.
And this is a common problem. It's about 40% of the US population. 128 million Americans have presbyopia. Worldwide, it's 2 billion people. So this is a very common problem. And I know for somebody who sees patients, when somebody is approaching 40, a little bit over 40, and they can't see up close, it really bothers them from a psychological point of view. When you're doing the clinical trials, how do you deal with the psychology of it?
Well, it's helpful that I am now in that age bracket myself, so I can empathize with them because I am also starting to notice those effects. It's nothing's wrong with you. This is not a deficiency of you yourself. This is just an unfortunate part of life, and we have ways that we can combat that. I think it's harder for people to deal with that don't typically wear glasses because their whole life they never had them, and now all of a sudden they need them. They have a harder time adjusting than maybe somebody who's always worn glasses since third grade, or they wear contacts. For them, it's a nuisance, but it's just kind of an added nuisance, not a brand new concept.
And what are the different types of treatments for presbyopia or loss of focusing as we get over 40?
So currently there's a couple. There's just strict reading glasses that people can get over the counter from a grocery store or Costco, those are simply magnification. So they do nothing for clarity, they just magnify. There's also prescriptive reading glasses that would incorporate a person's distance prescription to make things sharper and bigger. For people who really need distance prescription as well, there are bifocals that are either lined or the progressive, which are the no-line bifocal, which give you the distance prescription on top and the reading prescription on bottom. There's also contact lenses that people can wear. They can choose to do distance contacts and put those magnifying lenses over top. There are multifocal contact lenses that have some varying success. And there's also an option called monovision, where a contact lens is placed in one eye that gives distance, and in the other eye would give them reading, which is functional. It's not perfect because neither eye sees perfectly. With both eyes open, I should say, they don't see perfectly, but it allows them to do most things. And then within the last year and a half, there was one pharmacological agent that was approved by the FDA called Vuity, which is an eye drop that is designed to improve the near vision.
And explain how an eye drop could actually help you improve your near vision.
So overall, the theory is if we can improve the near vision without affecting the distance vision pharmacologically, that this will allow the people to have the vision that they're looking for. So the one that is approved currently called Vuity is a miotic, which means that it shrinks the pupil and gives the pinhole effect. And the pinhole effect is like you would see in a camera, like it focuses the light down to a single spot to allow the person to see up close. That's the overall concept of the one that is approved right now.
MacuHealth, your science-born and tested solutions for visual performance, macular degeneration, and dry eye syndrome. New products coming soon. Embrace the science.
And you've done different clinical trials with different drops that make the pupil smaller, so you get that pinhole effect. So it's like if you can't see and you look through a little pinhole, you could see, but of course you don't have any peripheral vision. So tell me about the different drops that you've tested, the differences in them, and why I have no peripheral vision here, but when they do it in the pupil, you still have your peripheral vision.
So we've have done 13 different clinical trials on presbyopia. We've worked on basically everything that's been tested. I don't know that we've missed any. The majority of them are based on that pinhole effect. There have been a couple that have come through that the concept was to soften the lens so that the lens itself had more flexibility to allow that light to focus. Both of those were different companies, different chemical compounds. Both of them were scrapped. So you asked about that earlier. It does happen. Both of those got scrapped because they weren't showing the results that they needed. What seems to work better, at least so far, is this meiotic idea of shrinking the pupil down. So the Vuity is pilocarpine, which is a medication that's been around for decades. It was previously used to treat glaucoma at a high concentration. So they found if we lowered the concentration, it won't have that decrease on pressure for glaucoma, but it does produce that meiotic effect. So by shrinking the pupil, people are able to see up close. It didn't have a significant impact on the distance vision, but some people did feel like there was some decrease in distance vision because they have gotten such a small pupil from what the intent was. The peripheral vision is still there because when you have a pinhole like you just showed, I mean, you're blocking peripheral with the function of your hand. When your eye is still in place, you're able to see peripherally because you still are getting light from all different angles instead of just right in front of you.
And now you've been working on a new one called acyclovir. Tell me how that's different than pilocarpine as far as mechanism of action. does it affect the accommodative muscle, or is it just the sphincter muscle? So we don't get the side effects that we would get by affecting the accommodation. And explain what the side effects from accommodation affecting the ciliary muscle, which performs accommodation, versus just using affecting the sphincter muscle and just making the pupil smaller.
Yeah, so pilocarpine is acting on the ciliary body. And when it does that, it gives the miotic effect, a smaller pupil, but it does come with some potential risks there. Because when the ciliary body is activated, it can pull and cause retinal detachments. It has happened. It has happened in clinical trial with pilocarpine. Aceclidine does not have that same it's non-selective, I should say. So it's going to affect the iris sphincter, which does the same thing. So if that muscle is activated, the pupil will shrink down just like it does with the ciliary body, but the risk to the retina is significantly reduced. So again, we did 13 different clinical trials, the majority of them on pilocarpine of one version of another. And we did see some retinal changes, some changes to the vitreous that we would expect were likely related to the use of that pilocarpine. With the aceclidine, there was none of that. In fact, I saw no clinical changes to the eye whatsoever after using the aceclidine. And I do believe it's because it is acting on that iris sphincter as opposed to strictly on the ciliary body.
So when we say the sphincter, it's just working on the iris to make the iris smaller, like a pinhole effect, rather
Yes.
than pulling everything forward. If it's working on the ciliary body and the iris sphincter, does pilocarpine work on both, or it's just a ciliary body, or you're not sure?
Well, it's non-selective, so it's less. It's probably working on both, but it's going to hit the ciliary body much more than the aceclidine that is designed to work towards the iris sphincter.
So aceclidine is would you consider it selective?
Yes.
So it's selective because it's just working on the iris sphincter. And how did they discover aceclidine? I heard it was a glaucoma medication that was used in Europe. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so it was approved in Europe. Again, it's been around for decades. It wasn't nearly as efficacious as some of the other options that we had in the United States, so it never got approval here.
Glaucoma, that is.
Correct, for glaucoma. And so what they found is that it also gave that meiotic pinhole effect with less retinal issues because of how it works. And so this company decided to try to work with it for presbyopia.
And in phase 3 clinical trials for aceclidine, what are we finding?
So here personally, we worked on, they had 2 trials running concurrently. One was for efficacy to see how well it worked, and one was for safety to ensure that there were no safety profile concerns. So we worked on the safety study. So we actually didn't do any efficacy testing. We didn't check to see how much improvement there was to the near vision. We were looking at, was there any retinal concerns? Were there any front of the eye concerns? And no, there was none. Like I said, we saw nothing, no changes whatsoever from a clinical perspective to those patients. There were some subjective complaints that you would expect to see with a pupil change. So there were some headache because of that change, but they were mild. They were mild both from the way we grade things within the scope of a clinical trial, and they were mild by the way the patient graded them. So the people who completed the trial, and I believe we had 26 different patients who did this trial, it was 6 months long, so they used it for a long period of time. None of them were bothered. Yes, they may have said they had a headache, and I think it might be worthwhile to say how we determine when these side effects occur. In a clinical trial, we have to ask at every visit, have you had any changes? Are you experiencing any problems with the drops? So sometimes a patient will come in and, their hands are, I hate this drop. It hurts my head. It does this. Nobody had that with this. This wasn't one that people were unhappy with. It was only when we asked, because we have to, if there were any problems, that anybody said anything. And then at every visit after that, we have to follow up. Hey, you said you had a headache with this drop. Do you still have that? Oh, yeah, I guess I do. Nobody was having major problems. It was more because we have to ask for them. So that's how we call them adverse events. That's how an adverse event is elicited during a trial is by asking. Of course, like I said, if there's a major one, they're gonna tell you anyway. But for our perspective on the 26 patients that we saw, nobody was having any issues other than what we asked specifically about.
And when you compare the pilocarpine product versus acyclovir, how long does it take for each one of them to work? And how long does it last?
So the aceclidine had a very fast mechanism of action. I mean, it was within minutes that people were commenting that they were noticing a change in how they were seeing, and it was many hours, many hours. I mean, mine is all going to be from speaking to the patients because we didn't measure their near vision, so it's anecdotal. It's me saying, how do you feel this drop is working? People loved this because it lasted so long. They would say it worked for my entire workday. I put the drops in the morning and I could still see my computer screen at the end of the day. With the pilocarpine based drops, it's less than that. It's probably less noticeable. I don't know that patients would say, this is amazing, I can see all day. It might work for a few hours, but it does start to wear off. And so with the cyclidine, it seemed to last a lot longer, anecdotally, with what we discussed with our patients.
And I think you said you did 26 patients. Is that correct?
Yes.
Of the 26 patients, how many people, said, can you give this to me? The clinical trial, I'm out of the clinical trial, but I still want to keep using it.
I mean, I couldn't tell you the number, but I would say the vast majority. It's a blind, that's not the right word. It's a masked study. So we're not supposed to know who gets what. But when the mechanism of action is as good as this was, and you see a severe decline in the size of the pupil, you know who got the real thing and who got the placebo. So of those that got the real thing, I would say all of them made comments. I heard things like, oh, I think I lost my last bottle. They're joking. They're going to give it back, but they didn't want to give it back. I had people wanting to know when it was going to come to market because they wanted to continue to use it. And also worth noting, I think, is that because we've done so many presbyopia trials, some of these people have done others. So there's several patients that have used Vuity before it came to market because we did those trials. There's people that used other versions of pilocarpine or the lens softening compounds. And now they've used the aceclidine, and that's the one that they all said, this is the only one that's worked. So anecdotally, it was significantly different than any other presbyopia trial we've done.
And what do you think is the ideal size pupil? There's those Kimura inlays, the surgical inlays. I'm not even sure they're doing them anymore, where they would they would actually put like almost like a contact lens in the eye that's painted, but we give a pupil size. And now there's a Apthera, which is an intraocular lens that makes the pupil size smaller to help people read after cataract surgery. So what pupil size was with aceclidine, and how does it compare to the IOL that made the pupil small Apthera or the Chimera inlays, where they put the surgical contact lens in that had the pupil in it?
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's nothing else that has been tested that has got the pupil to the size that the aceclidine has. So their goal was a sub 2 millimeter pupil, and that was accomplished within their trials. And that, I think, is why there was such an improvement in the near vision. Also, there was no change in the distance vision. And in fact, some people had an improvement in distance vision. So that's different than what we experienced in some of the other trials as well, is that not only did we have a longer sustained near improvement, we had a no change or improvement to distance vision with minimal to no side effects. The other options I think that are out there were larger than 2.5, 3, looking for a smaller pupil, but that sub 2 pupil seems to be where the difference is.
Well, that's pretty nice. And I think that's really amazing about it. It would improve distance vision. Now, with people that needed glasses, did anyone have their distance vision improve where they didn't have to even wear their distance glasses? Because
No, it wasn't that good. It would be more like maybe a line of letters. The other thing that is I liked about this trial, and when you asked about what makes a trial good, is it's hard for me when a study is comes across my desk and they have what's called inclusion exclusion criteria. So things you must have to qualify for the trial and things you may not have to qualify for the trial. And when those are so restrictive, how is this going to work in the real world? Like if you're saying this in this trial, patients cannot be on any antidepressants. Good luck in this day and age to find a sample of people that are not on antidepressants. So for the trial with aceclidine, there was very minimal exclusions. People were able to be in the study that had a high range of refractive error. So the other trials we've done, they had a cutoff. Like it was like maybe a +2 to a -4, which is a good range, but there's plenty of people that could benefit from a drop like this that have a higher prescription than that. With the aceclidine trial, it was a much wider range of refractive error. The other thing is that they allowed people who have had LASIK or PRK to be in the trial, which is, to me, the very person who's going to benefit the most from a drop like this. They've already decided they don't want to wear glasses. They've already paid money not to wear glasses. They will continue to search for ways not to wear glasses. And when they need them up close, that's the very patient that's going to kind of do well with this kind of a drop.
so LASIK, they could post LASIK, they could use it post cataract surgery.
Yep, we had patients that were in their 70s. One of the ones who loved this drop the most was, I forget exactly how old, but he was in his 70s, so he'd had cataract surgery and he loved the drop. So it wasn't going to be an elimination of the need for distance glasses, but it did not hurt the distance vision in any of these people, the people that had LASIK, the people who had cataract surgery. If anything, they did notice an improvement in distance as well.
And it's as an adjunct to multifocal contact lenses. I know people a lot of times wear multifocal contacts. I fit them myself, people that need bifocals or reading glasses. And sometimes it's just not, no matter what we do, with all our best efforts, it's just patients are just not happy enough. How is this to go along with the multifocal contact lens?
So it's a good question. I hadn't put too much thought into that because in my mind, this is more for your people who didn't want to wear contacts at all. But I can see a world where you can use the drops and then continue to use the multifocal lenses, or even just use the drops and use a distance only lens, which A is going to be cheaper for the patient because they're not paying for the multifocal lenses. And B, I think will give them that increase in near vision that they're looking for.
And, as we finish up here, is there anything that I didn't mention that any questions that you think that you should tell our audience about these drops, aceclidine, which is coming soon, or any of the previous drops?
No, I think for me, again, I've worked on over 100 clinical trials since I started doing this, and lots of them, as you can see, have come to market. I can count on one hand, literally, the number of medications that have come through here that I think, wow, this really works. And this is one of them. I mean, patients loved it. I could see an improvement in how patients were reading. I saw no issues from a clinical perspective, front of the eye, back of the eye. So it really does work. And I think that for our industry, for optometry, there's some concern and fears about using it because we saw what happened with some previous versions of presbyopic eye drops, and B, we don't want it to take away from our bread and butter, which is glasses and contacts. But I think it's just a different way of looking at what we can do for our patients. You know, when multifocal contacts came out, I don't think we looked at that as stealing from our bread and butter. It was just another option that was going to work for some patients. Presbyopic eye drops aren't going to work for all patients, but there is a subset of patients that would love the option. It's our job to give those options to our patients. And I think you can build a practice on it because once this comes out and it continues to show what we saw in clinical trials, patients are going to want it. And if you're not willing to prescribe it, it actually could hurt you. So I would just say keep an open mind to using it. If you're a patient, keep an open mind to prescribing it if you're a physician, because again, 100 trials and maybe 5 that worked. This is definitely one of them.
And when do you expect it to be FDA approved? I know you never know with the FDA, but is there any kind of timeline? Quite frankly, I want to use it.
Yeah, I know. I would tell you that it's probably going to be a year or so before it's got approval.
And what's the name of the company that's going to manufacture it?
It's called Lens Therapeutics, LENZ.
And where are they out of, and where's it manufactured?
You know, I don't know. They're in California, but I do not know where it's being manufactured.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Natasha Hindman for joining me today on the Open Your Eyes podcast with Dr. Kerry Gill. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us about clinical trials. And I want to thank you personally for doing clinical trials, because when you do come out with a clinical trial, it affects the way all of the doctors prescribe and help our patients. And then you multiply us by all the patients that we see, the thousands and millions of patients. And because of the work you're doing, you're helping millions and millions and millions of people, not only in the United States, but worldwide. So I want to thank you for that and joining me today on the Open Your Eyes podcast.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
Fitting multifocal contact lenses presents a big opportunity to meet patient needs while growing your practice. Alcon is your partner not only with our innovative portfolio, but through e-learning. Learn to enhance your multifocal strategy today with the Alcon Experience Academy.
OIE Broadcasting is the emerging leader in social media. We use scientific entertainment to drive more patients into your office. Visit oiebroadcasting.com and sign up today.